And yeah, I'd love to just, allow everyone the opportunity to introduce yourself quickly, if possible. I'll kick it to Eva, and then if you want to just pick someone, why don't we do it that way? And who you are, where you're from, one quick thing you're looking forward to this summer, and that'll be it. So I'm Mike, Cambridge Somerville State Representative. So glad that you've joined us, and I'm looking forward to going to Cranes Beach, which is a favorite of mine, and I haven't been there yet. Eva.
Hi, I'm Eva, Cambridge resident, also Director of Safe and Stable Housing with United Way, and I am excited to go to the beach and kayak, and also Cranes is absolutely my favorite. And I will pass it over to Nicole.
Hi everyone, I'm Nicole. I live in Cambridge as well. I'm a PhD student at Boston University School of Public Health and Health Services Research. Something I'm looking forward to this summer is being done with taking my candidacy exam next month.
Pass it to somebody.
Yes, sorry. I will pass to Matt.
Hi, I'm Matt. I'm actually a Melrose resident, but I'm covering this meeting for Cambridge Day, and I'm really excited to learn more.
Thanks.
I'll pass it to Alice.
I'm Alice Kidder. I'm director, co-director and president of Solutions at Work, which is an organization that was started by homeless people in 1984 and works to bring people out of homelessness. Oh, and my looking forward this summer to visiting my summer cottage on a lake in upstate New York.
That is awesome. Thank you for joining us, Alice. I'm going to actually pick the next person because I feel like we are honored to be joined by one of my state representative colleagues. So Representative Scarsdale, it's great to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, thank you, Rep. Connolly, and good evening to everyone. I'm Margaret Scarsdale. I represent the First Middlesex, which is a bunch of very small towns in north central Massachusetts. I am looking forward to kayaking on Heald Pond and other places and live theater. And I will kick it to my friend out west, David Greenberg. Nice to see you, David.
Hi, Margaret. Nice to see you also. David Greenberg, I'm in Coleraine. Probably haven't heard of that. It's way out west near Greenfield. And I'm with the Franklin County Community Land Trust. We're just getting underway and just very interested in housing stuff. So, and I'm looking forward to kayaking also. And I'll kick it to Henry.
Hi, Henry Waters, here in Cambridge, and I work with our Revolution, Massachusetts, and I am looking forward to not kayaking, but what I really am looking forward to in the next few months is to see social housing becoming a phrase that thousands of people use rather than a phrase that only in this country a few insiders know. I'll give it over to Daniel.
Hello all, Daniel Wong here in Somerville. I'm affiliated with Somerville YIMBY, a couple other groups. I'm excited for my nieces moving from Germany to Pennsylvania. So not a flight away, but still a 7-hour drive, but still excited to be a little bit closer to them. I'll pass to Aaron Weber.
Hi, my name is Aaron Weber. I'm also with Somerville YIMBY. I am excited to do a lot more grilling and cooking outside this summer, spend some time just chilling out in Somerville. I'll pass it to Corrine.
Oh, thank you. Hi, I'm Corrine Wingard. I'm also a Western Mass person. I'm on the leadership team of Progressive Democrats of Massachusetts, and having just come back from vacation, I'm looking forward to hanging out on the deck. That's about it. Can I pass it to John Cullum, my friend over there? I see him in the corner.
Yeah, thank you. Jonathan Cohn, he, him, his. I'm the policy director with Progressive Mass. I hate the heat, so I'm not personally a huge summer fan. The summer, like canvassing is the thing that really gets me actually to go outside in the summer, but I look forward to it being sunlit for longer than in the colder parts of the year. I got on late, so I'm not sure all of whom went before I got on, but I saw Lee Ferris. Did you go yet?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Lee Ferris. I'm from Cambridge. I head up the Cambridge Residents Alliance, and I'm a member of Our Revolution Cambridge and the Cambridge Housing Justice Coalition. I am looking forward to time at the beach and even kayaking to the beach and fun walks with my dog. And I'm also not sure who's gone, so I think maybe we should do a hands up at this point for who's not gone.
I was gonna say that. Raise hands. Thanks, Lee.
I meant the virtual hand. It's a lot easier to keep track of.
Oh.
So
Now we have
I'll
to find the
pick
virtual
Jackie.
hands.
I'll pick Jackie.
Hey everyone, I'm Jackie, pronouns are she, her. I'm with Cape Cod DSA, and I'm looking forward to the end of the summer where it gets a little bit quiet around here. I will pass it to Maggie.
Hi everyone, Maggie, also Cape Cod DSA, and I'm living looking forward to seeing a lot of my late Big Brother's friends that I haven't seen in a while. And I will pass it to, I think Michael's here. Another Cape Cod DSA.
Hola, folks. I'm Michael Harris from the Cape Cod DSA. I am a humble private in the Army with Captain Maggie and General Jackie. I'm looking forward to. I'm going to Comic-Con out in San Diego, and then 2 weeks later, I get to go to the DSA's national convention, which is held twice every year, and we are also participating in the Writers Guild strike here on Cape, and so yesterday we got to go out on the water and basically stop the production of a movie until contracts for writers can be got. So it's been pretty busy and fun, and I can't see who's hand because I'm driving, so someone can just go.
I'll go. I'm Sharon. I live in Cambridge. I'm a member of the Greater Boston Interfaith Organization, and our major campaign is for housing. And we're really excited because on Monday, Mayor Wu is coming to hear from us. About 800 of us are going to be talking about housing justice. I'm also a member of NAMI and the National Alliance of Mental Illness, and housing, of course, is always at the top of our list of needs. And I'll call on Evelyn.
Yes, hi. I basically came just as myself, though I am a member of the Union Square Neighborhood Council. I used to work in the affordable housing field and just was interested. I live near Union Square. I live in Union Square, basically, Somerville, and just wanting to hear more about social housing. Oh, I guess I have to call on someone. How about Jamie Entwistle? Jamie, you're muted.
Oh, I thought
or something. Now we,
You can't hear me?
No, we can hear.
Yes.
now we can.
God, okay. So I'm Jamie Entwistle, and private citizen. I just moved to Lancaster. I was homeless. My child and I were homeless for 4 years. And we just bought a house from Habitat for Humanity last year. I was working as a housing coordinator for a nonprofit. But my son is special needs, and I had to leave my job. You know, that's been challenging, but I am so excited to be working with Eva on her new project. It's just so exciting to me because obviously housing, you know, is really near and dear to my heart. So for so many reasons. But I'm just really grateful that I get an opportunity to participate. And I'd also like to know about that lake from Representative Scarsdale because we just moved to this area and I have no idea about anything. And I love kayaking and have a kayak. So, and I'm excited this summer to find a great spot to kayak. And my son and I are also going to Chicago to visit my sister, who is not actually my sister. She is my godmother's daughter. So I'm just very excited. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. Who's next? Shelley?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm Shelley Wordis and I live in Cambridge. I work with Cambridge Our Revolution. I'm not excited about the heat that climate change brings to us every summer. I kind of wilt in the summertime. But I am excited to hear more about social housing and to see its the interest in it grow. And thank you to Mike for all that you do for the whole state and the country. So I'll pass.
Thank you. And we're already 4 minutes over for introductions. So I want to get to everyone. So let's go rapid fire. Who's next? Dave.
Hi everyone, I'm Dave Halprin, he, him. I live in Cambridge and I'm representing A Better Cambridge, and I am looking forward to a family education where sort of the extended families renting out a big house in Cape May, New Jersey.
Thank you. And why don't you pick the next quick intro?
Pooja?
Someone else? I see Sherry.
Yeah, hi, I'm Sheree. Sorry, it might be a little loud. I live in Somerville and I currently work with the Mass Alliance of Fed Tenants and also and I'm to camping this summer. And I will pass it to Jason.
Thanks. Hi, folks. I'm Jason Pramus. I'm a journalist. I live in Somerville. I run the Boston Institute for Nonprofit Journalism and also separately the Somerville Media Fund. And I'm looking forward this summer to, on the binge side, we're launching a new independent statewide news organization called Horizon Mass that will be largely run by our interns. And I will kick it to Corey.
Hi all, Corey Alberstein, she, her. So I'm here because I'm really interested in the legislation you've introduced and in social housing. And also I do a lot of work on climate justice and climate action. And I'm really hoping that we can marry the mission of retrofitting existing homes with the need for more people to have much more affordable housing, as well as building new all-electric, safe, clean, comfortable housing for all. So looking forward to hearing more. Let's see, George.
Hello, everyone. My name is George O'Toole. The Government Affairs Officer for Mass Housing. I'm looking forward to hearing Representative Conley's great social housing plan. I think it's going to be great. Looking forward to working with him on this. And that's it. Thank you.
Wow. Well, thank you, George. And thank you everyone for joining us, and hats off to Mass Housing. We've actually had a few different conversations and meetings with both the director and different staffers to talk about this bill. So I'm about 7 minutes behind where I said I would be on intros. So I'm going to go through the next part super quickly, and then we'll talk about the social housing bill. And the plan is to leave a solid half hour for questions and conversation before the 7 p.m. hour when we will wrap up. Just in case anybody, wanted to know the background, I know for some of you, this is a return visit to our legislative table, and I know for others, this might be your first meeting. So we started this table earlier this year as a way to really invite constituents, advocates, and housing justice organizers really to come together around two goals. The first, putting together a universal housing vision in Massachusetts, something that actually, if you said do this and then the problem is solved, which I know sounds idealistic and I know is a far ways off, but it seems like there's a need for that in the housing space. In the environmental space, they have the Green New Deal. In the healthcare space, they have Medicare for all. And many of us feel that the failure to actually articulate a comprehensive vision and program that would solve the problem is something that holds us back. The second purpose of this table has been to convene people and invite people to find out when there's an opportunity happening at the legislature. We've noticed over the years, as we know, things come up in the legislature, sometimes on very short notice. And by time the word gets out to constituents or advocates or organizers, it might be too late to participate. And so that's a big part of what tonight's meeting is about. In our first two meetings, I have to say, those of you who were there, I think you'd agree, this topic of social housing continually came up, and people's excitement around it was really extraordinary. So that's really what we're going to talk about primarily. I will mention briefly just some of the other highlights that we saw since our first meeting here. One highlight was that there was a big tax cut and budget debate in the legislature. I'm proud to say that I was one of the first to really articulate opposition and concern to some of the tax cuts. And we've seen the Senate has really carried that analysis. And so now both the tax cut bill and the budget bill are in conference committee. There's a very important element that's also in conference called Chapter 257 that will help protect renters who are seeking rental assistance from eviction. I see we have Mark here from MLRI. They have been doing some great work. Thank you, Mark, for advocating for that. And I'm hoping a very strong version of that will emerge from our conference. Some other big highlights since the last time we met, the governor went ahead and appointed the housing secretary, Ed Augustus. The Joint Committee on Housing has held 2 oversight hearings. This was actually a good sign. It used to be that our oversight hearing was 1 day. And this year, Chair Arciero and Chair Edwards found so many areas of interest that they decided we needed to have 2 days of oversight hearings to just sort of get the lay of the land going into this session. That was certainly productive. There was a rent control and foreclosure protection lobby day a few weeks ago that was well attended. I was able to be there to witness that. And then following that, we had a very powerful transfer fee lobby day, and that was another thing that Mark Martinez and others were involved in organizing. just some unbelievably powerful testimonies as to why we do need this universal guarantee and commitment to housing for all people. What else has been going on? The governor has announced a green bank, which isn't quite the same as a public bank, but it does appear to be something that could be very helpful as we look to fund the renovation of existing affordable housing and bringing it up to sustainability standards. And just today, the governor announced a capital investment plan that includes many investments in housing. But to be sure, we are anticipating and expecting to do a housing bond bill this session. And that will be an incredible opportunity, I think, to move forward both on the investment front and I hope on the policy front as well. And so that's really something about what we're talking about. And so all of that segues me into the legislation that we recently completed drafting and have now introduced into the legislature. I'm going to see if I can pull this fact sheet up just to have something to look at. Here it is. Thank you to Chris Addis in my office for putting that together. And so this is a bill that we have worked closely with a gentleman named Paul Williams from the Center for Democratic Enterprise, as well as people like Daniel Denver down in Rhode Island. And folks like this have been working with legislators around the country to introduce this concept of social housing. And as you can see on the fact sheet, social housing in its simplest definition is state-financed mixed income housing that is owned by local or regional housing authorities. And what's so powerful about that is it combines some of the social benefits of public housing and public ownership with some of the cash flow advantages of your typical market rate development. And that allows it to avoid the challenges that doomed so many of our public housing programs over the years. And it's fascinating to learn that the original concept for public housing in the United States was mixed income housing. And we actually moved down that road for a few years. And it was actually the real estate industry and it was the banks that said, wait a minute, we can't let this continue. It's going to be a wild success. We need to make public housing just for poor people, because if we can succeed in that, then we can stigmatize it, then we can defund it. And then that is exactly what happened. And that's where we are today. And so it's really fascinating to understand how this supposedly new idea is actually an original idea from 100 years ago. And if anyone hasn't muted, please mute. I'm hearing a couple different things in my headset here. So as it says here, and I'm going to go through the section summary quickly, and by about 6:30, we're just going to open it up for questions, thoughts, or conversation. But we anticipate that typical projects could set aside that, I would call it really the holy grail of housing mix, which would be a third for lower income folks, a third for middle income folks, a third for higher income folks. And I really want to highlight this line right here because I think this is so important. Unlike our spending on other housing programs, such as rental vouchers or even the low income housing tax credit, certainly, to be clear, very important programs. But unlike our spending on those programs where the money goes out the door and then maybe we get something for it and then the money's gone, with social housing, it's a revolving loan fund. And so that means the money goes out the door, but then over time in future years, the local housing authority remits portions of the rent back to the social housing revolving loan fund. And so that's part of what makes it so powerful, is that the money doesn't flow in one way. Instead, it becomes a big circle of investment in the public interest, where we actually retain some of the equity that we're putting out there. And so I think it's that aspect of it combined with the mixed income aspect of it that makes it so powerful. As you see here, absolutely, we believe social housing could help us reach that goal of 200,000 new units. I frankly, I'm happy to be proven otherwise. I frankly wonder if there's any way we could ever get to that goal of 200,000 without social housing. And as we outline here, this can really complement our current modes of production. And there's a lot of interesting things that could happen here. For example, right now we're in a state where the fiscal policy of the United States completely contradicts our housing goals, right? We hear over and over, we need to build housing. We have the Federal Reserve keeping interest rates high with an explicit intent. This isn't incidental, this is their intent to discourage lending, to thereby discourage new housing construction, to thereby lower the pressure on commodities and thereby lower inflation. And so I point that out simply to say that we can't just rely on the market to deliver all the housing we need. Similarly, although we have some wonderful programs around tax credits, we know those aren't always the most efficient programs when the money only flows in one direction. And so how I think about this is a complementary additional mode of production. And so if we are serious about building housing, we should be engaging with all of the viable options. And this is clearly a viable option. It's something that, as it says here, it's been proven successful in Montgomery County, Maryland. And Montgomery County is actually on a path now to have 20% of their housing production in that county. It's a county of 1.1 million people. They're on track to have 20% of their housing production come from their social housing program. And so, it definitely isn't just an idea. It's something that's been proven, probably most famously here in Vienna or in Singapore. I mentioned Rhode Island a little earlier. The House Speaker and the Senate President in Rhode Island have both publicly endorsed this concept. The California Assembly, I'm sure many of you know the famous housing advocate Alex Lee. His bill actually passed the Assembly just a couple of weeks ago. And in California, they're actually saying, hey, Massachusetts is working on this too. So that's pretty neat. So I'm going to just super briefly run through the section summary for you, and then we're going to just go with questions and comments. And so the way we propose setting up the legislation, some of these initial sections are more perfunctory or technical in nature, but the basic idea, I'll just sort of give you the basic idea, is the Commonwealth would float $100 million in bonds to initially capitalize the program. So this would be state money to start the program. We then would like Mass Housing to be the administrator of the program. However, we don't want to put too much pressure on you, George. So we do say or other designee if for some reason Mass Housing isn't interested in this, but we feel very much hopeful that this is something Mass Housing would do. We know that you have the expertise. We know that really it is in your mission to ensure affordable housing for all residents of the Commonwealth. And we also know that this isn't an original model. There are many programs where the Commonwealth does initial capitalization and then trusts the professionals at Mass Housing to go ahead and implement the program. And that kind of reminds me of the governor's Green Bank proposal or Green Bank initiative that just got announced. So Section 3 is really, I would say, the core of the bill. It establishes, as I mentioned earlier, a social housing production revolving loan fund. And then what would happen is local or regional housing authorities would apply to that fund to secure financing to develop mixed income social housing And that the housing built here would remain in public ownership. Mass Housing would have flexibility to use this fund for debt service, for administrative costs, and to increase development capacity within local and regional housing authorities. And that's so important. You know, just as a side point, we can talk about spending money, but even if you're holding $1 billion in your hand, it doesn't spend itself, and it certainly doesn't spend itself efficiently and effectively unless you have built up that human capacity to actually spend the money in different levels of government. I think this is one of the issues we have with the MBTA. We need that human capacity to ensure the money we spend is actually working well. As you can see here, this is not intended to sort of partner with programs like a low-income housing tax credit. Much of our affordable housing is produced through that tax credit, and that's terrific. Instead, the idea here is to establish an entirely new mode of housing production to run in parallel with the free market, with our conventional affordable housing production, with other kinds of institutionally backed housing production, so that we are running on multiple tracks at once, trying to produce housing. And if you think about that, connecting just a couple of things I mentioned earlier, there are very powerful opportunities. Let's say the Federal Reserve is keeping interest rates super high, and it's hard for the private market to secure the financing it needs to produce housing. In that case, what typically happens is a bunch of contractors and construction workers lose their jobs. Architects, may not get the contracts to do the work that they would like to do. So if you build up a robust public development capacity, you can start balancing it off so that you're maintaining consistent employment and consistent production. And I would argue, if we're ever going to get to those housing production goals that we have, we're going to need to move forward on programs like this. It requires stable rents. I think that's almost intuitive. We are designing these programs so that people can live there stably and with dignity. Our bill also requires net zero energy performance standards. And since our future can't include any new fossil fuel infrastructure, we don't really see why we would be bringing online infrastructure that is essentially obsolete, and that includes new gas hookups. So that's pretty much the outline. Section 8 also deals with things like prevailing wage, good labor standards, public procurement safeguards. I'm going to close this window. I always forget how to use Zoom the minute I'm sort of leading a meeting. Does that happen to anyone else? What do I do? Hit escape? Does that work? Close this. Here we go. So that's pretty much, the quick overview. I know I went quickly. Again, cross-subsidization, I think, is such a key element to this. It really allows the state development entity, which again is backed by the Commonwealth and administered by Mass Housing. It allows this entity to partner with local housing authorities to do mixed income projects. And the final thing I'll say is, and it's sort of repeating myself, when we build public housing for a mix of incomes, the great advantage is now that balance sheet isn't just poor people. And I can say that because I grew up in public housing. So I am a firm believer in public housing, but I also understand if all of your tenants are of the lowest incomes, there simply won't be the cash flow or the opportunity within that project to sustain that in a dignified way over time. And so that's really, I think, the core of the idea. So with that, I'd love to hear questions, thoughts, concerns, etc.
You're muted, Mike.
Oh, excuse me. If we end up needing a stack, we can do it that way. So feel free to put stack in the comments. I'm going to go by hands, and I see Jeevan Sabrina Wheeler, recent city councilor who's running again for city council, and a organizer with the Working Families Party is here, and he's my constituent. What do you think, Jeevan?
Thanks, Laura Connolly. I'm super excited about this. Super excited to hear the work on this and to sort of see it presented. We had been talking a little bit about Rhode Island, where I'd worked on a similar legislation for social housing that had some progress this session. The sort of self-funding, the fact you take the profit motive out of housing and then you have that extra money to invest back into it with the revolving fund makes a ton of sense. One of the things I was curious about was in Rhode Island, they were interested in the fact that right now, union laborers don't qualify for a lot of affordable housing construction because the projects right now don't pay prevailing wage. They sort of are looking to pay lower because they don't have the funding for it. And they were really interested with social housing program to put enough funding into it to allow it to be union jobs, to sort of create good jobs for union workers. At the same time, they're building affordable housing. Just curious if that's something you looked at here at all. And apologies if you already talked about that because I joined a couple minutes late.
Sure, yeah. Well, certainly, again, the bill starts with all of those prevailing wage and good labor standards. Certainly, one aside that was on my mind, who here is familiar with the Clarendon Hill redevelopment in Somerville? And so that's state-owned public housing, at least some of it. And it was so painful. We went out, the city went out and got $35 million from Redgate, a for-profit real estate developer. And then for years, Redgate and others working to try to put the deal together, the fight was we can't have good labor standards, we can't have good jobs, and we can't redevelop the public housing. And so they pitted the Clarendon Hill tenants against good jobs and against organized labor. And I look at it and I'm like, well, wait a minute, if we had this social housing revolving loan fund, it could make the $35 million investment. And instead of dealing with Redgate telling us we can't have affordable housing and we can't have good jobs, we could just make the math work better. And that would be a way that would actually help us renovate existing public housing. And I'm simplifying it a little bit for the sake of time, but completely agree with you, Jeevan. And we, all people are entitled to affordable housing. So if there are organized labor folks who can't afford housing, I mean, that's a problem as it is for so many of us who can't afford decent housing. I see we have, I'm gonna go to Alice Kidder and then George O'Toole, and then we'll continue down the stack. Alice, thank you for all your work with the Green Street Shelter. It's always great being in touch.
Thank you. I was wondering, when is advocacy needed? Where is this in the legislative process?
Excellent point. So this bill is being heard on Monday. And frankly, for those of you who know the legislature, it's pretty astounding. We got it filed, the final text filed just a couple weeks ago. I worked closely with Chair Arciero. He got it on the agenda for Monday, so you could send testimony in. Hopefully everyone got in the materials we sent out. It explains that the sign-up deadline for Monday is actually 5 p.m. today. So if you wanted to testify, you should have signed up by now. If anyone on here has a burning desire to testify and missed it, send me an email or shoot me a text and I'll do my best. Nevertheless, I will say, Alice, typically we would have allowed more time to organize more of an organized presentation. However, because a bond bill is anticipated later this year, our approach was to get this bill on the hearing docket as soon as possible, put it out there, introduce it to the committee, and then continue doing work to build support. So I can tell you all, the Cambridge Housing Authority is doing a meeting with me and with Paul Williams, one of our lead advocates, where we're going to be explaining the idea to them and looking for their support. We have plans to hopefully meet with the Boston Housing Authority. So we're doing all the work.
Wonderful, thank you.
Thank you, Alice. George, I'm so glad you joined us, George. I'm honestly honored to have someone from Mass Housing here.
No, when I met you up the State House, with the other stuff you were doing, and this program is just really a great program. I say thank you very much for taking initiative and to all the hard work to do this. There's a lot of hard work you're putting into this. People don't realize to put all this together. It's amazing what you've done so far and actually get to that hearing. Alice kind of stole my question. I was going to ask the same thing. I will be at the hearing Monday. And whatever we can do on my end, please, Representative, let me know to help you in any way we can. You're doing great work. Keep it up. This is great stuff. This is what is needed. This is really good stuff. Thank you, Representative.
Well, thank you so much, George. It's great to hear that. And I would absolutely, welcome and appreciate any positive comments or thoughts you can add to this, to the committee. I think the vibe on Monday is going to be one of introduction. Many people, even in the legislature, aren't quite sure what social housing means. And so I think our approach on Monday is that, we really believe there's an opportunity here to address a portion of the problem. And we're just grateful that, we're getting this early chance to present the idea, and super excited that you'll be there on behalf of Mass Housing. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Representative.
Thank you. I'm going to go to my constituent, Lee Ferris, and then I'm going to go to, I see Michael Harris and Dave Halpern, and then Maggie. So we've got a little stack here. Lee.
Hi, so I assumed that this housing would be roughly taking 30% of someone's income, but I was wondering if you could outline how the categories for 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 would work specifically. If you look at a bell curve of the distribution of income in the state, I am worried that 1/3 would end up overrepresenting very wealthy people. So if you could say a bit more about how that would work so that wouldn't happen, I would like to hear that.
Sure. Thank you for that. And also, in case anyone missed it, I'm putting into the chat box the blog post that we did, which we continue to revise after we put it out. So if you haven't seen the latest version, there it is. And that has links to a lot of the materials here. And so to your question, Lee, so the bill includes a couple of sort of floors, absolute minimums. There must be 20% of the housing available to people at 50% AMI, or 40% of the housing available to people at 60% AMI. It has a couple of floors like that. However, it doesn't go all that prescriptive in terms of trying to figure out the balance, because it's our understanding, at least at this stage, that some of what will be possible in terms of the income mix will really be dependent on the individual context. And so, for example, if we are doing a social housing project and we have to acquire land on the market to do it, obviously that project will have more upfront cost than if we do what I hope we do, which is Governor Healy has promised, and she's working on a statewide accounting of all of the land that we can make available for affordable housing. One of the key reasons why we were really pushing this is certainly there are going to be different ways to develop that state land, but we want to make sure the social housing program is a key part of developing that state land. And in projects like that, we could anticipate a very generous distribution of affordability. So I think to answer your question, I completely, you and I know each other. We're coming from the same place, I think, on this. I also think we didn't want to go so far down the path of trying to prescribe all the percentages that we lose sight of what I think are the core things we're really trying to pitch here, which is a state-financed public development program of mixed income housing in partnership with local housing authorities. I think that's the real idea. And if we build consensus on that idea, then I think we will prescribe those details. What do you think? You're muted, I think.
Great. Sorry, I had some noise back here. I think it sounds good. I do want to go read the blog post. Thanks. Mike, you're muted.
Oh yeah, excuse me. Okay, so next we have Michael Harris. Michael, thank you for joining us. And I'll
Thank you
update the stack here.
Thank you for doing this. Yeah, so I had basically the same question as the previous person. And I guess on top of that is the expectation that rents will be adjusted over time. So obviously there's upfront cost of construction, but then at some point that gets paid off and it becomes a maintenance phase. And my guess from what you just said is that that's kind of to be determined. So maybe a more pressing question would be from an organizing standpoint, who are the people to pressure or I don't know, kiss up to move this thing forward? I know a couple or like a month and a half ago, the Medicare for All folks had a lobby day. We spoke with Julian Sear and Sarah Peak, and as members of leadership, they told us to talk with rank and file and not to worry too much about leadership, which is, obviously interesting take. But so I was wondering who would be the folks that you think would be the key people to moving this forward? Who would be the main reps that would be kind of roadblocks?
I would say at this point, I think if you gave everyone in the legislature a pop quiz about social housing, almost everyone would probably fail it, except for Representative Scarsdale, who is, who's here this evening. I honestly think that with this concept, it's so unknown that I don't think there's any secret formula or magic bullet. I just think we have to share this idea with everyone who's interested and really educate people. And I think the housing emergency is so bad. And again, coming back to a little bit of what I briefly said earlier, the truth is the solutions, aren't emerging, they're not on the table. No one has shown us sort of the path that you just do this, this, and this, and it's all fixed. So it's so challenging and the situation's so bad that I actually have a lot of hope that over the course of this year that this concept will really take off here the way it has in Maryland and the way it is in Rhode Island. So I would say talk to your reps and then talk to anyone who will listen. And certainly after Monday, I think we will continue engaging with everyone here to think about more structured steps as we go forward. But right now it's really a matter of just sharing the idea. So yeah, thank you for that question, Michael. I see in the chat, are you looking for more co-sponsors? Absolutely. I just emailed the building yesterday to ask for co-sponsors. I'm really proud to say I will show you all here if it's here. I'm proud to say that we have, I'm looking for the grand total right now. We have myself, Representative Sabadoza from Northampton, Representative Montano from JP, Senator Jalen from Somerville, Senator Eldridge from Acton, and Representative Hawkins from Attleboro have all signed on in the first 24 hours. So grateful for that. I'm going to go to Dave, who was next on stack, and then Maggie.
Hi. So I'm a big supporter of this. This is really exciting. Thank you so much for bringing this forward. So this makes a lot of sense on the funding side. I'm wondering how you're thinking about the permitting side of things. Would projects using this funding go through the existing 40B process? And if this is going to be a significant component of our housing production going forward, should we be thinking about strengthening short 40B or any other kind of permitting reform? 40B, it really is first and foremost an integration law and not a housing production law.
Sure, great question. You know, I kind of view it as we have a lot, first of all, we've done a lot of work, I think, on the state level to make permitting easier. Certainly, you know, the housing choice law, as well as the MBTA communities law, were longtime aspirations for housing production that have been done on the state level. So now that implementation's happening on the city level and the town level. Certainly there's more we can do for permitting. I will say, frankly, I think there's a lot more good advocacy happening around permitting and zoning. And there's probably less advocacy around the financing of affordable housing. And I think that's what this gets to. So I think the focus right now in terms of presenting this idea is really selling legislative leaders and stakeholders on the value of this production model. And probably, I think, on a separate track, that work that's ongoing, that it sounds like that you're very supportive of, around permitting and zoning, is going to continue to be ongoing. And that's going to create opportunities not just for social housing, but also for conventional affordable housing, and also for market housing and other kinds of housing. All that said, you know, as we work on this, if specific limitations or needs arise, then I'm sure we will incorporate them. How does that sound?
So I guess I think MBTA communities is much more focused on market rate, and I don't know that you're necessarily going to be able to build to a scale in most cases where cross subsidization would make sense. And I do think there's something that needs to be thought of in tandem more specifically for this. I think as is, you would have to do most of these through a 40B sort of process. I would love to, I don't want to take up too much time here. I would love to have more of a conversation with you about this.
Totally, yeah. No, completely happy to have that, convo. And you know, again, I see them as very important issues, but certainly on the financing side, really an idea here that we're really hoping to educate people about at this hearing on Monday. But yeah, let's talk more.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm just gonna look at James had a comment. Are you looking to get union support for the bill? I actually worked with our labor leaders in Massachusetts in drafting the bill. And so that Section 8 of the bill was a product of much of their input. I was down at the IBEW building a few weeks ago for an incredible AFL-CIO presentation on the investments they're making in affordable housing. And so I think there's tremendous opportunity here. I mean, if we wanted to be, cute about it, we could have called this a Green New Deal for housing, right? Because this is something that's intended to be pro-labor, pro-environment, pro-equity, and all of that becomes possible because we are acting like real estate developers, but we aren't having to fulfill the need to make investors more wealthy. So that gives us the capacity to go further in areas that are challenging. So that is James's question. Where was I? Who's next on stack here? Was it Maggie? Maggie, you're next.
Yes, hi, thanks. This is very exciting. Just some, and I'm sorry if this was on the blog post, but as far as the funding applications and the responsibility on the part of the housing authorities this is sort of a three-part question. It all has to do with the funding. We have this $100 million proposal revolving fund, and I know it's from personal experience what people go through during the different funding cycles to fill out these, even a community one-stop application. This is a revolving loan fund, and how will the housing authorities be equipped to apply for this? Will it be on municipal land? Will they need municipal land? And I'm just concerned that the different municipalities will be vying for the same pot of money.
Sure,
and
no,
how that would work.
Sure, no, I completely appreciate that. And I think it could be on existing housing authority land. It could be on existing municipal land. It might be on state-owned land in a municipality, or it could be on private land that is acquired by the state for this purpose. One of the things, and Paul Williams, who was instrumental in helping us draft this bill from the Center for Democratic Enterprise, one of the things that he's very intentional about, and I mentioned it earlier, was developing the capacity of our housing authorities. And so I think your point is really well taken. One of the things this bill enables is for some of the funding, obviously we want to put most of it into building stuff, but some of the funding is also available for that purpose of developing capacity with local housing authorities. On some level, I mean, I suppose there will be some degree of competition insofar as, it'll be a state pot of money that cities and towns could apply to. This sort of connects to one of the questions that Charlie Keller had in the chat, so I'll address that as well. Could we get this going on the local level? Certainly, I think we want to get to a place where we have our city administrations and our city elected officials supporting this bill. And I've had great conversations already with many of them. So certainly we want our cities telling the state to do this. And at the same time, I also think there's nothing necessarily stopping a city, or there could be some legal things stopping a city given that this is Massachusetts. But generally speaking, I don't think there's anything inherently that would prevent a city from developing their own revolving fund. Of course, the scale would just naturally be much smaller if the fund was set up on the city level. But at the end of the day, I think there's all kinds of opportunity for collaboration. And I think one of the themes you're hearing here is building capacity of our housing authorities to do these projects. All right, I see. Thank you, Daniel Wong. First of all, also want to give a public shout out to Daniel. He helped recruit some people to come this evening. So thank you for doing that, Dan. Who is next? Is it Rabbi Yoni?
Thank you for putting together, first of all, the bill, and second of all, this evening.
Sure, thank you.
I think this is the best bill that I've seen in maybe decades and that I could imagine. So thank you very much.
Wow. Team effort.
Yes. So as time allows, I'd love to get to know more of your team as well, and some of these great people on the call. I'm, I guess, somewhat new to housing advocacy. It started, I was doing broadband advocacy, and I spoke to your assistant, and he said, it's really important for people to have a place to live before you think about the other things. And I started thinking about that a lot. And so I really think it's great that you're putting together the state finance public housing, social housing. I was wondering a few questions. One is, where does it get built? I happen to be in Cambridge, Massachusetts, constituent. I would love to have a lot here, but I could also understand that maybe you want to put it other places as well, because a lot of the pressure on the Cambridge Housing Authority is from some people who maybe want to be other places, but I personally want to be here. Another question is just logistically, I've been involved with the city council. I'd love to know what's the system to get more involved at the state level, to attend the hearings, to know what's happening when, to know the agendas, to know how to sign up for public comment. A thought kind of for further on, not to change your bill, but what do we want to do about home ownership for low-income people? And that ties into housing stability because, for example, we have a tenant in our building who's been here 20 years on a CHA based lease, and the landlord can walk in any day and say, hey, your son is smoking in the building, we're going to evict you. Or the landlord can just evict people for no reason because they don't like them, but because they feel they're complaining. And the whole summary process system doesn't really give a fair shake to the tenants, doesn't give them enough time, doesn't give enough process, doesn't allow them to air their grievances to actually adjudicate something without losing their housing. So those are things that I'd love to hear your thoughts on in general, and other people might be interested as well.
Well, thank you so much, Rabbi. That is such a good set of questions. I took them down here as I gather my thoughts. So where does it get built? Again, you know, it could be anywhere that development is possible. You know, I'm sitting here in the Port neighborhood of Cambridge, and there's the Cherry Street lot, which I know Lee Ferris would probably know a little bit more than many of us as to what's happening with that. But I'm just referencing an empty lot in our community that some have said would make a good site for affordable housing. Another, I think, a great opportunity here, and I'll share with you all, as I initially started socializing the bill on Beacon Hill, I heard some really good feedback from people who said, wait a minute, Mike, you want to start a new public development program, and we have an $8.5 billion, at least, probably more, public housing maintenance backlog in Massachusetts. And that's not federal public housing, that's our own public housing. And initially, you know, I heard a little skepticism. And, you know, I started thinking about that. First of all, we should recognize it's not the public housing's fault that it ended up with that maintenance backlog. You know, that's a product of austerity and other issues over the years. But second of all, and I alluded to it earlier, you know, I thought about the Clarendon Hill development in Somerville. And to tell you just a little bit more about that, and I'm sure Bill Cavallini, who I'm going to call on next, knows a thing or two about it as well. But in that deal, you know, it was about 226 units of state-funded public housing. It was allowed to become completely dilapidated, and complete outrage that our residents were subject to these, you know, unsanitary and inhumane conditions. And there's literally no money to fix it. And so then the idea becomes, we'll go out to private real estate investors and we'll say, give us capital, because we, you know, we're the state, we can't get any money apparently. Give us the capital. And then what they're doing is they're redeveloping it into about a 525 unit project where they're going to maintain the affordability for the prior public housing tenants through ongoing vouchers. And they're going to add approximately 230 units of market rate housing to the mix. So there'll be 530 or so new units, roughly half sort of affordable, roughly half market rate. And that's the only way that we could come up with to renovate our state public housing. And so the point is, again, instead of having to just turn to private investors to renovate that housing, we could turn to the social housing fund, and then we could renovate that housing with a much more generous mix of affordability. And we wouldn't have had to spend years having them fight organized labor and fight our community, telling us we have to drive the costs down lower and lower, or they'll never do the deal. So I bring that up again to say some of this could involve existing sites. So wait, that's one question. How do you stay involved? You're here. So this is really, I think, where to be, the legislative table. Again, part of why we're doing this is to really, you know, give me, as someone who's on the housing committee and who chairs the Housing for All caucus, really a chance just to stay engaged and let you know, here's what's happening and here's when the hearings, et cetera, are. And then your final point on home ownership, I love it. You know, I am an avowed leftist and an avowed democratic socialist. And at the same time, you know, I've never owned a home. My parents never owned a home. I'm a renter in Cambridge, and certainly, you know, feeling the same financial strain that anyone in my position would feel right now. But that said, even though home ownership, you know, isn't really in reach for me, I understand that if we want to win rent control, if we want to win social housing, if we want to win the housing justice that we need, then we have to show homeowners that we are, you know, on the same page as they are, because 70% of voters in this state are homeowners. 2/3 of the residents of this state live in an owner-occupied unit. And I can tell you, when I knock doors in my district, you know, many of my constituents who are of lower income, you know, often people of color, you know, I might mention rent control, and the answer I hear back from a constituent is, I would like to own a home. You know, my family has been systematically denied the opportunity to generate, you know, wealth, and I want that opportunity that's been denied to me. And so I only emphasize that and lift it up to say, I think it is important for us to have a vision of housing that doesn't put us in a position where it's too easy for the real estate industry to come along and then set it up as an us versus them. And so, you know, the vision for housing that I'm really excited about is a vision that says, whether you're a homeowner and whether you're a renter, you are entitled to safe, stable, affordable, sustainable, dignified housing, and the government will have a comprehensive program to ensure that all the gaps that exist in our current system are going to be addressed. So I hope that helps answer that. I'm not really sure, you know, precisely how we would link the home ownership up with social housing, but I think that it could be some interesting questions. So I'm gonna go to Jason Pramis, and then I'm gonna go to Bill Calvallini. Has anyone else who's yet to speak wish to speak? Because if not, let us know now. Are those going to be the final two? And then we will call this meeting adjourned, and we'll take it from there. But Jason.
Yeah, I just want to bring up an issue that we could discuss in the future, because this is I think it's a great bill, and can't do everything, obviously. But I do want to put some thought, and I'm sure Bill Cavallini has some thoughts on this. You know, in light of, like, for example, you know, US2 developers in Union Square managing, we're hearing, as my reporters are out there looking at this, you know, they evade project labor agreements, they evade prevailing wage, they find different ways to use ununionized, you know, and like low wage immigrant subcontractors, fly-by-night subcontractors, and so on and so forth. The construction side of this is worth looking at. Like, what can we do to start to tighten up regulations, you know, pro-worker regulations on construction companies, but more to the point, figure out ways to get public money on point to help develop construction cooperatives, and think about public construction units like they have in many countries, where it's not just automatically the private sector, so-called, that we know does a terrible job with building things as it is. You know, how can we improve this, get, you know, socialize this production, get it more under public control, but not necessarily make all of it under government control.
Yeah, great point. Thank you, Jason. And, you know, I see some of the points in the comments, which I completely agree with, you know, regarding, you know, could we partner with cooperative, community-based ownership models? The bill actually does have, I skipped over it, but there is sort of a catch-all section toward the end of the bill that makes it explicit that there would be really wide flexibility in terms of potentially partnering with a community land trust or with other sort of cooperative models of either ownership or management. I think in terms of rolling the bill out, you know, this is such a foreign topic to the legislature that in terms of the initial rollout, we've tried to kind of narrow it down to sort of one use case example. But of course, you know, what I think is, and I was talking to someone yesterday about it, and they were like, wow, you know, we could have all these other things in the bill. And I was sort of like, again, you know, the core idea here is this financing ownership model. And I think if we collectively build consensus for that public financing, public ownership type model, then as we move along, we can drill down to some of these excellent thoughts and details and try to get them written into it as well. So points all really well taken. So we're gonna have our final comment from someone who I consider him a legend. I always say words of accolades to Bill Cavallini. I wasn't here at the time of the Simplex Steering Committee, but I've heard about it. It's pretty legendary. So what do you think, Bill?
Well, I'm going to celebrate you for your eloquent advocacy for this bill. And you always have the words to describe things in language that everybody can understand. So I want to celebrate that aspect. You know, people that have talked about cooperative issues and you know, options and I obviously would support that over. I came in sort of 20 minutes late into this, so you might have covered this, but if there was something in the bill that would incentivize the land that was being used for this housing to be land trusts, that would be great. Now, maybe that is one of those refinements that you're looking at down the road. But there are very few towns that have land trusts, so it's not like there would be, you know, this whole dozens of opportunities. But it's something that I think is be a great addition to this approach.
Well, thank you for that. And, you know, this has been, I think, a very fruitful line of thinking here. So before we adjourn, I'm just going to pull the bill up real quickly and I'll show you a little bit of what we're talking about. Let's see, hopefully this pulls up. Are you seeing that? We're looking at the bill here. You can see I got State House News open, of course. So here's the bill. You can see our co-sponsors, so psyched about them. But what I wanted to get was the PDF. Oh, hold on, I'm on the wrong screen. Escape from there, share screen. Here we go. Sorry. I'm driving the ship and rowing the boat at the same time here. So as we look down here, this was kind of that catch-all section, and I'm a licensed attorney. So no, this is the catch-all section. So I'm a licensed attorney. So I like to think of how we draft stuff to sort of give us options. And so as we say here, this is Mass Housing, who we hope will be our designated administrator of this program. And we make it clear they can enter into partnerships with other quasi-agencies, with nonprofits, or with community land trusts for the purposes of facilitating or assisting with the production of mixed income housing and the purposes of this act. And so, you know, if there were questions regarding who should do the operations, certainly operations of the social housing would be part of the purposes of this act. So that's a long way of saying sections such as this were really intended, I think, to get at some of the thoughts that you all just raised, that there can be more potential to have different kinds of partnerships beyond just the local housing authority. So, all right, well, I would say any more final questions, but I already said would be done at 7. So I guess I should just wrap this up and say a huge thank you to all of you. It's a beautiful day out there. It just turned summer, and you all took an hour and 15 minutes this evening to learn about our new social housing bill. Check out that blog post that I put in the chat. I'll put it in one more time. If you go through that blog post, it is loaded with links. There are links to articles, there's links to analysis, there's links to other legislation. So many of the questions that we all have are probably addressed somewhere, not just in the blog post, but in all of the different links that we linked to. Thank you to my constituent, Richard Krushnick, who shared some of that material last week, and I went and included it in the blog post. So with that, we will adjourn. My staff and I will follow up in the coming days with a recap of this meeting and discussion for a next legislative table meeting. And again, on Monday, the Housing Committee will be meeting. The agenda for the Housing Committee is also linked in that blog post that I just put in the chat. We will be hearing discussion about public housing bills, including this bill, about homelessness bills, as well as home rule petitions. Although not all the home rule petitions are in the Housing Committee, some are in revenue, some are in municipalities, etc. But thank you. This was a blast. I'm so glad you joined me, and we will continue pushing for this idea. Thanks a lot. Good night, everyone.
Thank you, Representative. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Thank you, Mass Housing. Take care, everyone. See ya.